Welcome to Becoming Parents podcast. I'm Jen Taylor, your host. I am mom of 18, and you can find me on momsrunningit.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive right in. Welcome to Becoming Parents. I'm the host, Jennifer Kimball, and today I am with Dr. Hohen. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. I'm so excited to meet you finally. It's been a while.
I'm really excited. I know we had to get all of our stuff lined up. Things change over time. You're in LA. We're in the same time zone. I'm in Reno. And I am fascinated by your website and your information and how I want to kind of jump in, like, you started school. Take me there, because now you specialize in infertility and it's pretty astounding. Your results are astounding. I've cyber stalked you, but where did this journey begin for you?
I've kind of had a lot of careers. I was an underwater photographer for a little bit, and then I was also in the film business. I have a pretty strong photography background, and I had a really horrible accident at work. I was in the film business, and I also at the same time was suffering from horrible, painful periods. So I had to literally every month throw up, take some Advil, and just kind of go to work. So I didn't realize that there was another solution out there. I just thought that that was normal. I'm kind of older, so I guess at the time it's changed a lot now. People have access to a lot more information, but at the time I thought that was normal.
Yeah.
So acupuncture got me back on my feet after my debilitating work accident, and it was so powerful. It also changed and transformed my period. So I decided I didn't want to be doing a physical labor job in my 40s. And so I went back to school and studied TCM, traditional Chinese medicine frameworks, and herbology. And then at the same time, I realized that I wanted to help more camera women because they're a very underserved part of the film crew community. And so I started really treating my friends. So after I got into school,
that's how we all get started.
yeah.
Perfect.
And so then I started realizing that a lot of people had this condition of dysmenorrhea, painful periods,
Yep.
and there were a lot of other conditions associated with it. And so there was a lack of information. And so I felt like I wanted to educate and empower people, and specifically women in reproductive health, so that they knew all of the choices out there for them. So then I started getting additional training. I trained in precision medicine, in functional endocrinology, and then I got additional certifications. And I'm now a fellow on the American Board of Reproductive Medicine. And then I ended up getting a doctorate in TCM frameworks as well. So I just kind of kept going to school, and it really is, as you know, being a clinician as well, we were talking about this before, but it really is a rabbit hole. Being a clinician is all about studying constantly, like for me, every second of the day, so that I have the information for the people that I serve. So
I mean, I think it's fascinating. I went through infertility 32 years ago, and I got up to IVF. So I had 7-day surgeries, and I was maxed out on Clomid and Provera. But it started when I was 15, and those, either I did not have a period, amenorrhea, or I would legitimately be in the hospital thinking I was going to hemorrhage, and how awful that is. And what's really fascinating is that my daughter, that's 31, the first biological daughter I had after infertility, she has the same issues with those really painful, super heavy, debilitating periods. And when I went, they put me on birth control, right? Orthonovum 777 is what I was on, which probably is like banned for life at this point.
yeah.
But when I brought my daughter in at 15, that's exactly what they did. So even though 21 years had passed, and I've watched her for the last, 15 years go through this process, she can't have children. Not without like a massive, she'd have to really go through infertility and doesn't want to. So I guess she cannot, without going to great lengths, get pregnant. But what they were doing to her was the exact same thing that they had done for me.
Yeah, we can really get into this. This is a good topic because it's astounding to me, like we have people that are trying to conceive that
Yeah.
are diagnosed with PCOS.
Okay.
The OBGYN will be like, well, have you tried birth control? It's like this knee-jerk reaction. And I think that it's really frustrating within this insurance convention,
Ah,
Western model, where we're having somebody dictate what your healthcare should look like based on what they'll pay for, right?
right.
So this is what happened when I had my accident at work. I was like, there is a whole other world out there of ways to heal yourself or to like find out what the root cause is, and you literally have to fox mulder it out yourself. So um that's from the X-Files.
Okay, sorry. I'm like, and okay.
Like, who's
Um,
Fox Mulder?
when I'm almost 53, so
Okay. Okay.
um, when you had your accident, the accident had nothing to do with your cycles.
No, I was rigging a camera in a bucket and I fell out, and I injured my back pretty badly. And so all I wanted to do was go back to work, right? And so at the time, this is like the early part of the opioid crisis, as a matter of fact. So it was
Oh,
like there was this whole like everyone suggested that I just go on opioids. And finally I met another camera woman at work, and she was like, no, have you tried going to Arno? Yeah, so this amazing, incredible, powerful
okay.
acupuncturist in LA. And so I was just like, one day after going to this amazing person, I felt better. I was like able to go back to work. And so at the time, it was more important to me because when you're a crew member, it's all about being able to like physically support yourself, right? So, and work, and you only have your body. So I was able to get back to work. And then at the same time, I noticed I kept going back every time I got injured at work, and he made me feel better. So it was incredible.
Okay, I'm glad that I asked that question
Yeah.
because for people who are not as
Yeah.
don't know as much about acupuncture, it's a very holistic, like your whole body. Because when you said I went for this accident and I had relief with my periods, those two things are not connected. What's connected is the acupuncturist who's saying, and what else is going on? And how
Right.
else are you feeling? So
Yeah.
talk to me about that, because as an infertility specialist later, that has to be a huge foundation in how you treat people for fertility, which like what I just described is, no, you do this, you go on the birth control pill, then you go off, then you go on Clomid and Provera, then you do these 7-day surgeries to check, flushing the fallopian tubes, taking chunks of your cervix and uterus to biopsy it, like all these things that are kind of like rote. And you have, that's probably great information, but with an acupuncturist background, I would think there's a lot in that. That's a melting pot for you.
Yes. This is like I love this. This is my passion. So yeah, so like Western models are based on more of a Socratic method based way of diagnosing. I'm sure you know this, being also a clinician, but we work the systems are very siloed, right? So with Eastern philosophies and TCM, it's more comprehensive in the sense that we really talk about the human's connection between heaven and earth, and how all the systems are related to each other, right? So
Mhm.
we're thinking about, if we make one move in terms of a great positive nutritional intervention forward with somebody's fertility, we're creating, it's almost like a ripple effect, right? So we're creating a better stress response, right? Better blood sugar stabilization, the body's propensity to heal and regulate, it gets compoundedly so much better. So we're thinking about moving forward with a patient at a slower way than
Mhm.
what you're kind of used to when you were talking about like, then I'm going on this, then I'm going on this, then I'm going.
Right.
We are waiting for these like small, profound results to kind of take effect, right?
I love that. I mean, I love acupuncture and I'm more familiar with it. I've had it done. It's not scary. You can be terrified of needles. It's not the same, but the results are so, like you said, the results are maybe seem smaller, but much more profound, which seems like an oxymoron and is absolutely not. And so I love that and the holistic approach. I mean, most people can relate to, like, my husband had something going on in his lower back, and I'm not a massage therapist and I don't know all the muscles, but I stuck my thumb right in the middle of his butt cheek because I could see how he was walking. I could just see his
Right.
movements. And I was like, it looks like it's right there. And I massage, and that helped his back, where you're saying everything is connected. And yeah, like, that's something that people can usually relate to. You think something hurts here, but actually, like in your wrist, but it's actually because you hit your elbow. And I just love that all whole body approach and how everything is connected, because it's so true. You did that and you got relief from your periods, which well, I mean, the relief from your back and the ability, that's huge. That's that in a day you felt better, right? That's monumental when they're telling you to go on opioids. But then you had relief from your cycles. So how much did that change? That, like, that's life changing.
That was life changing. And I never, like, I was able to, like, I was able to run. I've always been a runner, so I was able to, like, run long distances. I wasn't able to ever do that on my period. And I mean, it was like really transformative and has stayed with me forever. And I actually, that was a lot more of the herbs that I worked with.
Mhm.
So when we talk about TCM frameworks, we have tons of spokes of the umbrella and ways that we create a powerful intervention that's long lasting, right? So we have the acupuncture and the point selection, which is all about harmonizing the body using the meridian system.
Mhm.
And then we have the herbs, and the herbs work synergistically with the point selection and the acupuncture to kind of create this long lasting, life changing effect, as you talk about. So it's a really interesting medicine in the sense that, like, I'll never go back to painful periods. Like, I like find that to be really amazing.
Yeah. I mean, for women that are hearing this who think, what? Like, how is that even possible? Your life is spent making plans based on a 28-ish day cycle, right? And what you can and can't do. Like, well, that falls on this. It's people plan their weddings or events around, like, well, I don't want to plan it so that I have my period for that. This is like your whole life is being planned around 1 week of each month ish, and what you can and can't do, and how miraculous, what a gift it is to not have to do that.
Yeah, and relatively, when we talk about costs and economics of
Mm.
healthcare, um, it's incredible. Like, this whole systems medicine. I mean, was the whole entire system of the country of China, right? Is all based on acupuncture and herbs and those kinds of interventions. And it's like amazing that this model is so successful and helps a huge norm. It's a public health medical system that works in China. So it's just incredible to me that it's so foreign here in the United States, because it's like, why aren't we doing this in response to this instead of overworking our physicians, prescribing, referring? It's just really interesting to me.
Well, I think you hit on it earlier. I mean, there's the pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies, and they're skipping and holding hands, and they think it's great. They're making boatloads of money, and the people's health is not the primary concern. Or they would do things like, I'm in Nevada, and I can't see a naturopath here because I want to, my gut reaction say they're illegal, but they're not licensed in Nevada. So to go around that, if you're licensed as an acupuncturist, you can bill through that. But we can, in our conversation, I'm still having a naturopathic conversation. And then it's so backwards, so backwards. The whole thing is so backwards. We could save a ton of money and a ton of health and a ton of stress, and it would cost less money. I mean, having a doula, having an acupuncturist cuts down on healthcare costs over time. That's not the goal of insurance and pharmaceuticals. The goal is not to save money.
No, and it's really interesting because how acupuncture even supports fertility has been really amazing lately. And so we're really enjoying a time in this country as fertility acupuncturists, which is my specialty. Because we're seeing a lot more RCTs, randomized clinical trials, come out
Mm.
that are showing that they can improve the efficacy of an IVF transfer procedure by about 43%. So
Holy
it's
cow.
incredible. So there's kind of two parts of that coin in terms of dosing and acupuncture right now. And this might be more nuanced for this conversation, but there's what is called the Paulus protocol, which is doing acupuncture 30 minutes before and after your IVF transfer procedure.
Okay.
And that we know improves IVF transfers dramatically. And then there's the whole systems type of medicine where you're going to acupuncture about twice a week leading up to your transfer for about a month at least.
Okay.
So, and we know that that also improves outcomes as well in live birth rates. So it's this great
Wow.
adjunct medicine to art technologies, and we're really seeing this profound effect of that.
I want to segue in because you just talked about how you specialize in infertility. And I know this all started with your accident and your cycles and having so much relief and going back to school. And we have all the links and all the information in the show notes, but I know that you do like pain, digestion, stress management, hormone imbalances. It sounds like women, moms, women. You know, I mean, we not that, and I'm not ruling out men from stress or GI or disorders or anything, but you really focus on supporting women's wellness and you specialize in infertility. So I really want to dive into that now.
Okay. Yeah. So how, I guess the first lead-in question would be to describe how acupuncture and herbs can support
Yeah.
fertility and reproductive health, right?
Yep.
So for a fact, we actually know that acupuncture regulates the nervous system and also improves circulation and blood flow to the uterus and the ovaries. So that's a big piece. And in terms of relaxing the nervous system, it also regulates cortisol. So that in turn
Oh, yeah.
can really kind of harmonize the interplay between estrogen and progesterone. We're trying to balance out ovulation and cycle length. So those are kinds of three things, the main three things that we talk about when we talk about acupuncture and herbal medicine. And we know that, like I said, so in terms of natural conception, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. So sorry. I think I just got a call. Sorry. Um, in terms of natural conception, one of the things that we empower women to do in terms of fertility acupuncture is to really regulate that ovulation time, right? So
Right.
we want to teach you how to predict ovulation so that you can conceive. So the other piece that we're looking at when we're talking about herbal interventions, this is more, again, more nuanced, but what that luteal phase progesterone output looks like more specifically, because this will help plan and protect the baby. And so that the embryo can really implant and stay in the uterus. So we're looking at what that graphic representation of the hormones look like on like a BBT chart, or I use a piece of femtech called the UVA kit. I can totally link that to you in the show notes. And so that helps you, that scans to a QR code in real time on your phone, and it'll just really give you a way to communicate with your clinician, right? So that's one of the things that a fertility herbalist will do, or an acupuncturist herbalist will do, is really get you the data so that I call it data avoids drama. So it's
Oh,
like,
okay.
we want you to, right?
Yeah.
So we want you to be curious and empowered when we're talking about your health. So I don't know about you, but like I had, again, even before I was in the film business, a very limited exposure to what my period was, what my hormones were doing.
Mhm.
I didn't understand the symptoms piece of hormones at all. So I think one of the roles of an fertility acupuncturist is to really educate their patient base around that. So what that means.
I love that. Um, so they come to you when they're, well, I'm guessing for lots of things, painful periods, but if it's specific for fertility, they come to you and you set them up so that they are more knowledgeable about their body. They recognize things better. They have a more clear idea of how their body is working. You can alleviate some of the issues that seem peripheral, but everything's connected. I guess I'd like to say, like if you have headaches or you don't sleep well, or you're like cortisol is really high, that's stress. I'm guessing you're dealing with them holistically and whatever their peripheral issues outside of IVF are. And then on that cycle, you can help them all the way through. So natural conception all the way up to IVF.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, ideally, like I would like to push back on our fear-based mongering around when a person decide, and I'm not villainizing IVF by this statement at all. Like I think it's a wonderful technology. We're making really great they're making great advancements in the field. I love it, but I wish we spent a little bit more time getting curious, making great decisions and interventions and changes to your nutrition and your
Yes.
lifestyle before you were going into that framework, right? Because whatever you do, whether or not you conceive during like your prep time, at least you're like empowered, is like you're getting yourself set up for long lasting changes, right? And more successful outcomes, a better pregnancy, a healthier pregnancy, and a live birth rate, right? We know
Yeah.
for a fact, even just like we haven't even started talking about nutrition, but just keeping your body really healthy, like at least give yourself 3 to 6 months before you even think about it. I mean, I don't know what your training is or what you think of that or
Well, I think the hardest part for the woman hearing that is that that seems like a long time to just to do nothing, right? To not be working on the
yeah.
fertility itself. And I think what a shame because the time's gonna pass anyway. And infertility, because I went through it up to IVF and then I just knew it wasn't my path. IVF was not my path. Um, and I always have thought like kudos to women who are willing to go through it because I was not willing to go that route. I just decided I wanted to do foster care and adopt. And if I could not get pregnant physically, that I would be okay with that. And I did. So it's easy for me retrospectively to say, yes, but I gave birth. But there's a lot of trauma in all of that, in infertility, in the pregnancies that I had, because no one is supporting. So what I would say to women listening is the time is going to pass anyway without the guarantee of getting pregnant. And if your personal health could be better, if your pregnancy could be better, if the baby's outcome could be better, if your postpartum healing could be better, and the time is going to pass anyway, why in the world would you not want to stop and take that 3 to 6 months to get everything ready to start? Like, why wouldn't you want to take that? Because I think people's pushback is but that's so much longer. Then I have to wait so much longer. We're very instant gratification society now.
Yeah. We had two cases last week, which were really interesting in office that are applicable here. And so had two people in tech. There was each a partner, believe it or not. I don't know how I got that same type of patient at the same time, but they went through 3 rounds of retrievals, like each, and they were like no viable embryos, and they were like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? And I was like, okay, well, let's just kind of, you guys can try naturally for sure over the summer, but like, let's just see what happens. And like, let's do the work. Let's do the acupuncture. Let's clean house, get everything in order. It's going to take us like 3 to 4 months anyway. And they both sets of couples conceived naturally on the same week almost. It was the weirdest, like, we're having a lot of these weird, like, yay, 2 pregnancy announcement things like this particular year. I don't know what's happening, but it was like a really funny story in the sense that it was like they were told by the reproductive endocrinologist, like, this isn't going to happen. And then the sad thing about sometimes with REs is like the REIs, it'll be an intervention until you can't afford it anymore. Right. So
Oh,
like this
yep.
heartbreaking
Heartbreaking. Sell everything you own just for the
journey.
possibility.
Yeah, and it's just like
It's so
it's
sad.
so terrifying, I think, to watch. And so it was great with these people to like I felt very like they were the underdogs of life. But you know, they were engaged, they were compliant, they like really got curious about their health, and like they really looked under the hood of their lives. And it was really great to see and able to like give the right material to like what their container was at the time. That was what
Yeah.
made it really exciting for me.
I love I mean, you have lots of kudos on your website, lots of success stories, which I love. I already know I'm going to share your information with someone that I know who just has had several miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage, and I've interviewed her twice, and it's just devastating. It's just devastating for women. And that's why I hope they'll see that. Like, I love how you said, look under the hood, clean house, get everything ready.
Yeah. Yeah. We call it prepare the palace. It's a it's a it's a whole thing in TCM gynecology. It's called
I
prepare the palace, right?
I love it. But
Yeah.
it's true, and, I think you can get so focused on the end result of having the baby that when you're selling everything that you own and you're doing everything like hell or high water, I'm gonna do everything I can to get pregnant. And I am not dismissing that does how strong that desire is to have children. I'm not dismissing that at all. I'm just saying, if you could just take a breath and relax and look at it from a different lens, that your emotional and physical sanity, your financial sanity probably, and your outcome would all be so much better. I can't even imagine the cortisol levels in these couples who are doing all of that to conceive.
Yeah. And
Just cortisol.
100%. And it's so like to your point, it's like a trauma experience, right? But like,
Yes.
what about refocusing the lens to Yvonne Farrell, who's an amazing professional in our field, is always says that it's not about making a baby, it's about creation, right? So it's a bigger idea than not just a human life, but like you are creating a new way of how you're going to move through this world, right? This is going to like this is a change, this is a huge change, right? So I like the idea of getting yourself ready for this new identity.
I I love that. And I know, you've said a couple things throughout our time talking together, like debilitating periods, had to plan around them, couldn't run. And now you just said, and it's been years, right? And you've said, I'll never have to suffer through a painful period again. That's just like one, it's huge. It's huge how much it affects your life, but that's just like
Yeah.
one small part of this whole process of infertility is the cycles that you had on the front end and how much it can completely alter your life for the long term. And I mean, having a baby alters your life for the long term. So making this a more holistic, natural, I feel like you're coming 180 degrees to how it should be. It seems like to me. What to wrap this up, because there are so many positive stories. I want people to have a lot of hope in just being healthier overall on top of the IVF, because you have a baby and you need to be healthier overall. I think women discount that a lot, that postpartum, that's another great area of focus with acupuncture and just you're refocusing on your health, in my experience. What would you end on telling the parents that are listening to this?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So first of all, you're never alone, right? So I have
Mhm.
a Facebook group. It's called Bun in the Oven Buzz. You can always join. I'm live on Tuesdays at 4 o'clock. And also, I'm developing a program that's online. So if you can't get to an acupuncturist directly in
Okay.
your town, we're going to launch the second cohort, the Positive Pregnancy Project, in January. So you can always stay tuned on all of my social media platforms for that. That's going to be really exciting. There's going to be a lot of one-on-one coaching and support, and a lot of live sessions and meal plans. And it's very transformational. So that's what I'm really excited about. But I guess like I would leave to don't give up on one person's opinion. Like, go out there and look beyond the confines of what you're accustomed to and dig a lot deeper.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Hohen, for being on. I appreciate you so much.
Likewise, this has been so fun.
Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Campbell, and today I have on with me Bronwyn Schweigerdt. Did I do that right?
Close enough.
I mean,
I think there's only one of me.
Schweigerdt. Okay.
Schweigerdt. Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Like I said before we got on, this is one of my favorite topics is parenting. So I'm excited to talk about
I'm
it.
really excited. And I asked you where you lived, and you're like 2 hours away from me. So I was ready to come to your house and visit and have some coffee. So that would have been that would have been good. We could have done it that way. Tell me, let's jump into your story on how you became a parent.
Yeah, I'll be really honest about, and so I told you I do parenting seminars and I do talk about my own experience because I agree with you, Jen, that would you say shameless
Self-promotion.
Well, not promotion here. It's more like self-disclosure. Um,
Ah,
and as a therapist, I don't really do this with my clients, but when I'm giving seminars, I like to because I think, for them to hear my own story, my own journey, me being humble enough to admit my own mistakes helps them identify with me. I think it dismantles all shame that they're hearing from me giving a lecture about how to be a parent when they're hearing how wrong I did it myself. So yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I think honestly, I didn't want to have kids, and I got to age 30. Was I 32? And there was a woman I knew from a volunteer job who also didn't want to have kids, and she was just like 3 years older than me. So she was 35 and she was pregnant. And she was like, "You should do this." And then when she had her baby, she's like, "Bronwyn, you should do it. It's actually really good. Like, I swore off having kids too." And I'm like, "Okay, if you can do it, I can do it." It was like the
wow.
silliest thing. But yeah, because I had, like you mentioned, our own background story with our childhood.
Yeah.
I had such a horrible relationship with my mother. I didn't want to repeat that. And I didn't think I'd be a good mother. And anyway, when I got pregnant, I went the other extreme. And I'm sure you've heard lots of these stories where I was like going to be the best mother. I was going to do everything that my mother didn't do. And that wasn't bad, of course, but looking back in retrospect, and this is before I was a therapist, so I didn't have a lot of
Okay.
insight or introspection at this juncture. Looking back, I idealized my daughter. She was going to be we were going to have, in my mind, the perfect mother-daughter relationship. She was going to be my little best friend. We were going to have like an unblemished, untarnished relationship. She would never reject me the way I rejected my mom. I mean, I idealized the hell out of our relationship mentally. And guess what? Things didn't go exactly like that, which was good. Now I realize as a therapist, that wouldn't have been good if my dream had been realized. Of course, not for her, for me, maybe not for her. And so she ended up really rejecting me because I kind of emotionally abandoned her when she was 5. I don't know if you want me to get into that, but I can say, and I didn't realize I was doing that. But she from age about 6 to just maybe the last year, and now she's 19, she really has seen me as her enemy and really rejected me. And now, because I am a therapist, I'm all about kids rejecting their parents through the teen years. That is a really necessary and healthy phase that we call individuation. However, my daughter got started at age 6 with that process, and it hurt me. I felt so rejected by her. I would lash out at her, and then it just snowballed and became like a really bad relationship. It became kind of the opposite of what my pipe dreams were.
I would love for you to go into that enough so that I can understand what that was like. You said now she's 19 and she she's an adult who has rejected you as a parent.
No, she is now finally coming to the place where we're friends, or, not friends, but we're at a really friendly place. She's now starting to go, yeah, actually, I do like a lot of these things about you. I do think you're smart. I do respect you. She's doing that on her own, and she moved out, and that was a really important piece for that to happen too. She's doing what, 19-year-olds are kind of supposed to do when they've gone through the phase of individuation.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, I wasn't open to that individuation. I took it personally, and
Okay.
therefore I rejected her back, and it snowballed and it became very dysfunctional. And I blame myself for that.
When she was 5 and you were expecting this to go the way you thought it was, you're going to be best friends and it was going to be great. How did she reject that? Because I mean, personally, I don't believe you should be friends with your kids because you're a
No,
parent
you're right.
until they become adults and you kind of, it's like a parenting friendship, which can be super fun. I have that with a lot of my kids and I really love it, but it definitely takes some time and effort on both parts and deciding that that both of you want that relationship. Um, so can you make it so I understand what happened when she was in that 5 or 6 and how she rejected you and how that continued to, it sounds like it was like a compound interest, like it just kept going around and around getting worse. Is that
Yeah.
kind of how it
Yeah.
was?
Yeah. So I didn't know the reason at, 5, almost 6 years old. She just changed towards me. But that, when I look back, I spent a lot of time, I talk about this on my podcast, like the importance of introspection and reflection on our lives. And I didn't do that until recently about our relationship. And I was like, oh my God, that's when our family moved. We suddenly
Mm.
relocated. I fell into a steep depression, like an
Yeah.
abysmal depression, abysmal depression. And, if you've been around someone who's depressed, it's like being around a narcissist. They can't see anyone else. You're just like in this pit, and all you can see are your toes. Um, so she experienced the same move that made me so depressed. I'm sure it affected her.
Yeah.
I didn't ask her how she was doing. I thought she was fine because she wasn't demonstratively crying and having crying spells like me, or like vomiting involuntarily like I was. So I was just all about me. I just emotionally abandoned her.
Got it.
Um, so she didn't, it was subtle. It was subtle, her change with me. She didn't say, I can't believe you're now like this, mom. But she acted differently. And here I was so depressed, and she was like my one comfort, and she's rejecting me implicitly. And it just compounded my depression. And I was so self-absorbed that I didn't take ownership of how I had failed her.
Wow.
Mhm.
At what point did you come out of that depression? At some point you had to kind of pick apart the pieces of this. It's almost like a puzzle, like what happened, when did this happen? How did this happen? Was there any point that she was demonstrative or that she did say anything? And when and how did you come out of depression?
Mhm. There was one little hint. So part of my retrospection and reflection that I do now. So this just didn't occur to me till last year. And again, this is now she's 19. This was when she was 5. One of the times after we moved, I had spent one-on-one time with her, and we were out in public at a cafe, and she said, "You're a bad mommy."
Oh,
And it broke my heart. The woman sitting next to us looks over at me and she's like, "You're not a bad mommy." And I would have started crying if she hadn't said that. But I look back and I'm like, oh, yeah, I was a bad mommy. I just didn't see it. And my daughter, for her to say that, we really have to take what our kids say, every word they say, as, um, I don't know, as like a clue. we really
Mm.
have to really hold every word they say as dear. And that was a clue that I was a bad mommy, and I didn't stop and reflect on it. I didn't look at it to see what it really meant. I didn't do that then. I just disregarded it or just took it in as like more painful, you know. What caused me to fall into depression was the move. And when I was a kid, our family also had a move. And so it was a triggering event for me because the move when I was a kid was the worst transition of my life. I was 10 years old and I felt completely emotionally abandoned by my grandfather, who was the only real parent in my life. He stayed behind in Ohio, and now I'm finding myself at age 10 with kind of no parents, or these warm bodies who
Mm.
are supposedly my parents, but they don't care about me. So that was like where my own childhood trauma began. And that move that we did, you know, when my daughter was 5 was like very retriggering because I felt very alone. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anything when we moved. So I felt completely alone, and I was being triggered by that. Um, and what got me out of the depression. Okay, so funny story. Um, so I sought out therapy, and even though I was hardly functioning at that point because I was I mean, I did not know you could be that depressed. Like I mentioned, I was involuntarily vomiting. Um, I would be walking down the street literally and just vomit. I would be driving my car on the freeway and vomit. Like, I wasn't trying to lose weight. This wasn't bulimia. I was just involuntarily vomiting. That's how depressed I was. I'd never heard of that before. So I went to therapy. I went to multiple therapists. And as dysfunctional as I was at that time, I remember thinking, you know, I still think I could be a better therapist than these guys because this is horrible. This is not helpful. So one way I got out of it was by going back to school, getting a second master's degree in counseling, and actually becoming a therapist. And that was super helpful.
I mean, I laugh because I have felt the same way. I remember, my husband and I struggling in our relationship and thinking, well, maybe if we have somebody to like mediate this conversation and help us, it'll help us figure things out. And we went twice. And the second time I'm like, is she taking notes about what we're doing? Because we were doing actually a really great job. I think the good thing about going to therapy with her was that we recognized that we were really doing a great job and we weren't as off as we thought we were
Mm.
in our communication. But
Yeah.
because hers was it was so bad. We were like, are we therapisting her? Right? I think she's
Oh,
taking notes. So I understand. Like I think it's can be challenging to find a therapist that's a really good fit. And if you've been through therapy and have not had a good fit and thought, I think I'm helping the therapist more than the therapist is helping me, or just then you understand that. But I do really believe I've had therapists that have been a great fit, and that's what you wanted to do. How crazy. So becoming a therapist, realizing that like that wasn't really working and you could do a better job, and going back to school helped you pull yourself out of your own situation. Well, I think that's great.
yeah. Isn't that the craziest thing? Yeah. Which, you know, I always like to say that everything in life is a double-edged sword. There's no such thing as something that's all good or all bad. Every blessing has a curse, every curse has a blessing. And as challenging as that time was, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, now I'm a therapist and I'm so
Right.
grateful, so grateful.
So that pulled you out of the situation that you were in, and then did going through school in that process teach you a lot about yourself, about your traumas? You know what I think is one of the hardest thing for parents is to realize, and this was something that I just it didn't click with me for a while. Like as a parent, I'm still living my own story. I'm still creating
Mm.
my own story and working through my own stuff while I'm trying to help these little people create their story and not allow my traumas or triggers to spill over into that. And at the same time, you know, my kids have grown up and said I was bullied at school or this happened, things outside of the house. And you think as a parent, "Oh, I'm gonna do a better job and be in tune with my kids." And even when you are doing that, you're a good
Mhm.
parent, doing a good job, putting your kids first,
Mhm.
recognizing them, talking to them, things still happen outside of your control that
Mhm.
traumatize them. And
Mhm.
that
Well,
it's hard.
I I mean, things can be hard for them. I wouldn't say that those things traumatize them. So I talk about this in my parenting seminar. Um, so let's be careful what we define as trauma,
Okay.
because so I give the example of, let's say little Johnny is 5 years old and his father dies of, God forbid, cancer. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's traumatic. Poor little Johnny. That's traumatic." Well, is it? No. Does it have to be? No. What if little Johnny's mother, the surviving parent, like says, "Hey, Johnny, tell me how you're feeling. Let's talk about this." Or maybe draw me a picture of how you're feeling. Or, help me understand what this picture that you are drawing about, like a boat sinking. Tell me what the people on the boat are feeling. Really, has a parent who attunes to him, which is
Mm.
even better than a therapist who attunes to him, because every child at every age wants their parent to attune to them over a paid professional. So if little Johnny's mom is like, "Oh, wow. So those kids on that boat that you're drawing in that picture, they're just feeling so alone and scared. And, let's talk about that. Help me understand if that is his experience, it's not traumatic. Losing a parent, even something so extreme as that, doesn't have to be traumatic. Is it hard? Yeah, sure. Is it unfortunate? Is it sad? Yes. But is it traumatic? No. Now let's take little Johnny, who, let's say all he experiences is just a little bit of bullying on the playground, a little bit of bullying. We wouldn't necessarily call that capital T trauma, but now he comes home, and let's say mom and dad are there, dad's still alive, but no one asks him about his day. Or maybe he tries to talk about it and they go, "Oh, you're fine. No, no, Johnny, you're good." Or whatever. They dismiss it, they minimize it, they deny it. So that could be traumatic. So trauma isn't the actual lived experience. What traumatizes us is feeling alone
Mm.
in our pain. That's it.
Awesome. I'm so glad that you stopped and described that. My husband now, he lost his wife, and so our youngest daughter lost her mom when she was 2, and I he was very present for her. It's very interesting that you use that example because I've seen that work. Because now she's 13, almost 14, and, I wouldn't say that in and of itself was a trauma at all, so
Mhm.
that's interesting. I also think, like, for people who experience PTSD, it can be a car accident. We always think you have to, like, go to war and have bombs go off and be a prisoner and like that. No, that's actually not what it is. Some people can go through that and not have PTSD, and some people can be in an accident and feel that. So that's true. It's definitely not about just what you go
Well,
through, but everything around that.
but even that, even a car accident, I'll tell you, Jen. So my podcast is called Angry at the Right Things. It's all about anger. PTSD is suppressed anger. And so
Mm.
someone who has a car accident, and they have suppressed anger because they feel betrayed by someone else, whether it was the other driver, whether, it was the passenger who was with them, who, you know, distracted them. There's some kind of suppressed anger going on for it to be PTSD. If there's not that suppressed anger, it's not PTSD. And the same exact experience could have been had.
Mm. So now I want to talk about you became a therapist, you started practicing therapy. Was there a time we have like your daughter was 5 or 6 and now she's 19, and in there you became a therapist and got through your own depression, which I'm really proud of you that that's what it's so great that that's what you did that got you through your depression and your desire to help other people who are struggling with this, right? So I totally get why anger and parenting are the two things that you specialize in. That makes sense to me now. From that to now, kind of take me through that with that relationship. How did becoming a therapist, did that help the relationship with your daughter between then and now? Like what things, or did it help you heal yourself, and how?
Yeah, it helped me heal myself, which allowed me to repair our relationship.
Mm.
And I love that you kind of your summary was very like simplistic, like, oh, you got over your depression. I
Yeah.
actually went
Ding.
in and yeah, I went in and out of depression for about 10 years. That was the most severe episode, but I did become, get in grad school and I got a lot better. And then when I started my internship, I sank into another depressive episode that lasted a long time. So I could talk more about that and why, because now I understand what led to it, which was suppressed anger. But I will say, me taking time to reflect on all of this, understanding myself, getting to know my clients, understanding the human experience, and seeing myself in that, seeing my mother in that, seeing, how humans are and how they function. Just the overall wisdom and understanding overall has helped me heal myself. I haven't used a therapist. I've been my own therapist. And then the last couple years, especially, so I'll give you an example with my daughter. So before she moved out, just like a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, one day, I went down for lunch downstairs and she was down there in the kitchen and it was just silent. And so I did what I always do when I'm around another person and it's silent. I ask questions because that
Mm.
silence is very, very intolerable for me. And so I asked her some questions to get her talking. And she is one of those very few people who hate to be asked questions, not just by me, but like anyone. And she didn't answer them. So at first, that silence was a trigger for me. Now she is rejecting my attempts to ask her questions. And so I got really angry and we ended up in a big blowout. So later, when I had calmed down, I came back to my room and I just thought through it all and I just reflected and I realized, oh my God, I am so triggered by silence in the presence of another person. And you know what? My triggers are mine, they're not hers. She is not responsible for my level of discomfort if she's silent. That's
Right.
my responsibility. I cannot put that on her. And if she's uncomfortable with my questions, if she doesn't want to answer them, again, that's my problem. When I feel rejected by her, those are my feelings and therefore my responsibility, not hers. So I wrote her like a big letter and I just said, her name's Edie. I said, Edie, I'm so sorry. I'm realizing like things about myself right now. Like I didn't realize how much silence triggers me when I'm with another person until today. I didn't realize like, how much that's affected me my whole life with everyone. And, I'm responsible for my feelings, not you. And so not only do I apologize, but I want you to hold me accountable in the future for all this. And it was just what the doctor ordered. And it was like her. So my summary here is that we as parents can't just apologize. We need to win our children's trust back and they need to see that we're doing things differently. And so saying something like, I'm not going to be perfect at this, but you can hold me accountable in the future. And that's what I said to her. And so the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been slowly winning back her trust.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. I'm ruminating. I didn't mean at all to minimize, like you went to school to be a therapist and poof, it was all done. I think it's a process. I find it really interesting you brought up silence. I did have a great therapist when uh, kind of before I had kids who said, don't be afraid of the silence because in my
Mm.
upbringing, when things were quiet, you were waiting for, like, when it was loud, you knew what was going on, but it wasn't, when it was quiet, it was a little terrifying because you weren't sure what was coming.
Wow.
And I think, like, it's crazy that you can have someone say one thing to you or have one experience that is so completely changes the trajectory of how you look at things and think of things. And that was one of mine also. Don't be afraid of the
Mm.
silence. And I was like, what do you mean? And he says, silence doesn't mean that something bad is coming. It
Mm.
just means that things are quiet. And
Mhm.
I was like, holy cow. I was 20, but huge difference in my life. So I completely understand, even with the even if people have something that's not the same example like I happen to have with you, you can have like one tidbit that you realize in whatever situation that really, really changes how you have conversations, how you move forward, with relationships. And that's massive. How did she respond to that, to holding you accountable? I think it can be possible for kids to struggle with holding a parent accountable for something.
She's always kind of just told me what she sees in me, but
Okay.
I think I started listening more. Like, for example, I don't know when it was, maybe around 2 years ago, she called me a narcissist. And instead of defending myself, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I am. And I started looking, and I always write her letters. I write like a Google Doc and then I'll send it to her. And I edit it before I send it. I'll write it for, and I have my clients do this too, is write a fantasy letter. And then that's for you to put your feelings into words, to externalize them, express them. And then you edit it to something you actually want to share with that person, if you're wanting to share with that person. So I do that with her. And I was like, I don't think I am a narcissist, but I do have narcissistic traits. And I
Hmm.
can see why you would say that. And you've seen them my whole life. So I don't blame you for saying that.
Yeah, I
So
think,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I think one big thing too, coming away from all this, is I'll talk to her and share like my thoughts and ideas with her. But now I only do that about things I know she's interested in, which are few and far between. Um, or I won't say anything at all and I'll be silent, which is still hard for me. I'm not going to lie. She just came over last night and we hung out together. And if she's silent, I'm like, okay, I'm going to get out a book and just going to read because I can't handle just sitting here saying nothing. But I'm going to accommodate her, not me, because that's my job. I'm the parent.
Hmm.
She's not here to make my life better. I'm here to nurture and attune to her, even though she's 19. That's still my job.
Hmm.
So I'm going to respect her need for silence and get my own needs met for myself and not expect her to meet those needs for me. So I got out of the book and I read until she's willing to talk. But now it's me just listening. And, sometimes she's silent for like a long, I would say uncomfortable period of time. And then all of a sudden she'll start talking about something and I just listen. So most of what I do now is listen. And if I do share something, it's only what she wants to hear about, what she's interested in. And if she shows me she's not, I'll stop talking about that subject.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the way that you turned that around. I think a lot of the times we, whether we realize it or not, want to meet some sort of need of our own through our kids, and it's like vicarious living. And I see it a lot in these moms that do the pageants, the pageant moms, not all of them, but the ones that are like on fire for their pageant child, and I'm like, wow, you're trying to get everything that you ever wanted in yourself through this child by putting them through
Yeah.
all this garbage. So I can't even watch stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's important to realize that we're predominantly supposed to be there for them, even as adults. And I think that you're right. When you said that, I'm thinking about my adult kids, and it does start to go both ways. I mean, I have a daughter that's 31, and definitely she asks me about my stuff, and she's in finance and I'm a doula. It's not even
Mm.
remotely the same, but even though I don't understand her job and she doesn't want anything to do with mine, we can still ask questions about how it's going. Like, I want to know, how's the client, what's the vibe in your office, is what I ask, or how's the office vibe going? I mean,
Mhm.
you find ways to have conversations about things that maybe aren't important to you, but are important to them. And they, in turn, as they get older, start to do the same. So I think that that's amazing. I want to
Yeah.
I want to talk about, I want to kind of wrap up and end on your therapy practice and your podcast, because I love what you said, that you started the podcast. And I think you said this to me before we went live. You started your podcast because you're in California. So anybody in California can
Mhm.
talk to you about being their therapist. But outside of California, you started this podcast so that you could get a lot of that information from your therapy practice out to everyone. So I I'm not trying to steal your thunder. I would love you to talk about both of those things.
Yeah. So I love helping my clients, and but I also do want to get the nuggets, the wisdom out to the general public. My goal is to help people bypass the therapy process if they can, if they're not having success with finding a decent therapist. And it's also twofold, to help anyone who is a therapist learn more, because
Mm,
when I started out as an intern, those first 3-4 years, I didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't. And school alone does not do the trick. Even your internship, which is 3,000 clinical hours, it's just not enough. You really need wisdom. You need to be ongoing, get ongoing training. And there's a lot of modalities out there being taught that are really, really not really helpful. So it's to help therapists, but also just to help people, be their own therapists, do their own therapy, and glean wisdom. So yeah, it's called Angry at the Right Things.
yes, I love that. The link is in the description. All the links to find you are there. And again, if people are in California, you're right there and you can work with them directly. But Bronwyn, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for sharing your story so
You're welcome.
boldly. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Oh, I thank you. I appreciate what you do, Jen. It's really wonderful.